Have you ever looked at your life and thought it was a masterpiece only to realize you were just looking at a painting made of thin glass? My name is Cade, and not too long ago, I had everything a man could dream of. A thriving real estate business, a home that felt like a sanctuary, and a family I would have died for. But in just one night, that masterpiece shattered into a million jagged pieces. And I've been bleeding ever since. I'm sitting here today, not in my office or my living room, but in a space that smells like bleach and desperation. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand how fast the world can turn on you. Before we get into the heavy stuff, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone was watching your happiness, waiting for the perfect moment to snatch it away? Let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I really need to feel a connection to the outside world right now. And if you believe in justice, please hit that subscribe button. I need all the allies I can get. It was our 7th anniversary. I remember the air that evening was unusually warm for a Tuesday in Chicago. I had closed a $3 million deal earlier that morning, and all I could think about was getting home to Lila. She was my rock, the woman who had been with me since I was just a guy with a laptop and a dream. I'd stopped by the jeweler to pick up a necklace. I'd custom ordered a delicate gold chain with a pendant that matched the color of her eyes. I felt like a king. I felt invincible. I even called my older brother Barrett on the way home. He was my partner in the business, the guy who shared my blood and my vision, or so I thought. I told him about the deal and how I was going to surprise Lila. He sounded happy for me. His voice was smooth, supportive, the same way it had been since we were kids. "You deserve it, Cade," he said. "Go enjoy your night. I'll handle the paperwork at the office." Those were the last words of the man I thought I knew. Looking back, I should have heard the coldness beneath the surface, the way he didn't quite laugh when I made a joke. But when you love someone, you're blind to the shadows they cast. I pulled into the driveway around 7 p.m. The house was dark, which was strange. Lila usually had the porch light on. I figured she was probably surprising me, maybe a candlelit dinner in the back. I opened the front door, the heavy oak creaking slightly, and the first thing I noticed wasn't a smell of food or perfume. It was a copper scent, thick, metallic, iron. "Lila," I called out. Silence. I walked toward the living room, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. I flipped the light switch and the world stopped spinning. There, sprawled across our white Persian rug, was a man I barely recognized. Reese. I knew him vaguely. He was a guy from the local country club, someone Lila had mentioned once or twice in passing as a distant acquaintance. But he wasn't just standing there. He was face down in a pool of blood that looked black under the LED lights. My breath hitched. I felt the custom necklace box slip from my hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. Before I could even process the body, I saw her. Lila was standing in the corner of the room, her back against the wall, her face a mask of pure terror. She was holding my 9mm, the gun I kept in the bedside safe for protection. Her hands were shaking so hard the barrel was dancing. "Lila, baby. What happened?" I stepped toward her, my hands raised. "Stay back!" she screamed. Her voice was thin, breaking. "Don't touch me, Cade. How could you? Why would you do this?" I froze. "What are you talking about?" "I just got here." Lila put the gun down, but the nightmare was only beginning. Before I could take another step, the front door burst open. It wasn't just one person. It was a swarm. Police don't move. Hands in the air. The flashlights were blinding, cutting through the room like white knives. I didn't understand. How were they there so fast? We lived in a gated community. The response time should have been 10 minutes, not 10 seconds. I felt the cold floor against my knees as they tackled me. The weight of 3 grown men pressed the air out of my lungs. I was shouting, trying to explain, but my words were drowned out by the chaos. I looked up through the tangle of limbs and saw Lila. She was being led away by an officer, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She turned her head back for 1 second, and the tears were streaming down her face. But she didn't look sad. She looked like she was reciting a script. "He killed him," she wailed, her voice echoing through the house I had built for her. "He came home and saw us together, and he just started shooting. He's a monster." The texture of that plastic mattress was the only thing that felt real. It was cold, sticky, and groaned under my weight every time I shifted, a constant reminder that my silk sheets and the scent of lavender on Lila's pillow were now part of a different lifetime. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadow of a cockroach dart across a crack in the plaster. Every time I blinked, I saw the flash of the muzzle, the dark pool on the rug, and the way Lila's voice had cracked when she called me a monster. It wasn't just a lie. It was a theatrical performance, and I was the only person in the audience who knew the script was fake. But in this place, the truth didn't carry any weight. Only evidence did. And the evidence said I was a killer. Morning didn't come with sunlight. It came with the aggressive buzzing of an electronic gate and the barking of a guard whose soul had clearly been eroded by years of looking at broken men. I was herded into a line, my bare feet cold against the concrete, moving like a ghost among the living. The cafeteria was a sea of orange, a symphony of metal trays clattering and low, guttural murmurs. I couldn't eat. The mystery meat and gray mush on my plate looked like the despair I felt in my gut. You're gonna want to swallow that kid. Starving to death is a slow way to go in here, and nobody's gonna cry at the funeral. I looked up. Sitting across from me was a man who looked like he had been carved out of old oak. His skin was a map of deep lines and faded tattoos, and his eyes had a stillness that was terrifying. This was Huck. Huck didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a librarian who had survived a war. He was peeling an orange with a precision that was almost hypnotic. "I'm not hungry," I managed to say. Huck leaned in, his gaze boring into mine. "You're Cade, right? The real estate guy. The anniversary assassin. That's what they're calling you on the news in the break room. Tell me who gains the most from you being in here. Follow the money, kid. Love is a motive for a movie, but money is the motive for the world." His words hit me like a physical blow. Follow the money. My mind immediately went to the firm. We had millions in assets and a reputation that was worth more than the cash in the bank. If I was out of the picture, Barrett would have total control. But Barrett was my brother. Surely blood had to mean more than a balance sheet. The next few days were a blur of survival. I was allowed one phone call. I tried to call Lila. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Blocked. My own wife had erased me. Then came the visitation day. I expected my lawyer, but when I walked into the booth, it was Barrett sitting behind the glass. He looked impeccable. A charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a look of practiced sorrow on his face. "Cade," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "God, I can't believe I'm seeing you like this. The office is a mess. The press is camped out front. It's a disaster." "Barrett, you have to talk to Leela," I pleaded. "She's lying, or she's scared. You know I didn't touch Reese. Barrett sighed a long, heavy sound that felt like a coffin lid closing. I tried Cade. I really did. But she's devastated. She showed me the bruises you left on her weeks ago. I froze. Bruises? What are you talking about? I never laid a finger on her. Barrett, look at me. You know me. He didn't look at me. The evidence is overwhelming, brother. And the company. The board is panicking. They want you out to save the firm. I brought some papers. If you sign over your management rights and put your shares in a blind trust under my name, I can protect the assets. I can use that money to hire a private defense team. He slid a stack of legal documents through the slot. It was a total surrender. Everything I had built would be his. Is this about the money, Barrett? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. He finally looked at me, and for a split second, the mask slipped. His eyes weren't sad. They were hungry. It's about survival, Cade. You're a liability now. I didn't sign. I pushed the papers back. I need to talk to my own lawyer first. Barrett's expression soured. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp edge. Suit yourself. But remember, every day you wait, the sharks get closer. And Lila, she's moving on Cade. She's already talking about selling the house. You're becoming a ghost. He hung up and walked away. I went back to the yard and found Huck. He came, didn't he? Huck asked. Because that's how the play works. They put you in a hole, wait for you to get desperate, and then they offer you a ladder that's actually a noose. Tell me about the guy who died. Reese. I told him everything. Huck nodded, his eyes narrowing. A gambler, Huck repeated. Gamblers have debts, and people with debts are easy to buy. You think your wife was sleeping with a guy like that, or do you think someone paid him to be in that room so you'd have a body to find? The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was an execution of my life. One afternoon, a new inmate arrived, a young kid who had worked as a valet at the country club. You know a guy named Reese? I asked. Yeah, the kid whispered. A few days before it happened, I saw him talking to a guy in a really expensive SUV, a black Lincoln. They were arguing, then the guy handed Reese a thick envelope. I remember the car because it had a custom plate. It said PRCE1. The air in my lungs turned to ice. PRCE1. Pierce. Barrett's middle name, and the vanity plate on his company car. The puzzle was complete. Barrett hadn't just framed me. He had bought the victim. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to scream, but I forced myself to stay silent. I had been the engine pulling a train full of parasites. I went to the library and spent hours reading about corporate fraud and the rights of the accused. I approached Huck again. I need someone on the outside to look into a bank account, a guy named Reese's bank account. Huck smiled, a slow, grim movement of his lips. All right then, I know a guy. That night, I didn't see Lila's face when I closed my eyes. I saw the look of terror that would soon be on my brother's. The copper-tasting air of the cell block always seemed to thicken right before the morning bell, a heavy, suffocating blanket that reminded me I was still breathing in a tomb. I didn't need the buzzer to wake me anymore. My body had developed its own internal alarm, a jagged rhythm of adrenaline and cold calculation. I rolled off the bunk, my feet hitting the frigid concrete, and immediately checked the underside of the bed frame. The name I had etched there, Barrett, was a jagged scar in the steel, a silent oath that kept my pulse steady, while the rest of the world thought I was rotting. I wasn't just Cade the inmate anymore. I was a man who had finally seen the puppet strings, and I was ready to start cutting. The library was my sanctuary, a dusty corner of the world where I could hide my movements under the guise of legal research. I sat in the back, surrounded by the smell of decaying paper and the low hum of the ceiling fan. Huck was already there, leaning against a bookshelf, his arms folded. "My guy made contact," Huck whispered. "The disgraced investigator. Name's Miller. He's exactly what you need. He started digging into Reese's financials. It's exactly what you suspected, Cade. The kid was drowning. And 3 days before, he ended up on your rug. A wire transfer hit his offshore account, traceable to a shell company out of Delaware called Sterling Heights Holdings." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I knew that company. It was a subsidiary Barrett had set up years ago. I needed more than a wire transfer. I needed to know about Lila. I needed to know why she lied. Later that afternoon, I requested a special meeting with the prison's chaplain. It was a calculated move. I talked about surrender. "I want to sign the papers," I said, my voice heavy with a rehearsed defeat. My brother. He was right. I just want peace. A few days later, Barrett returned. He had arranged for a private legal consultation room. He slid the same stack of papers across the table. "I knew you'd come around, Cade," he said. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly. I signed the papers. I watched him tuck them into his leather briefcase with a satisfying snap. He thought he had won. But the panic didn't take long to set in. 2 nights later, I was pulled from my cell during the midnight count. I was taken to a dark corner of the yard where 2 guards I didn't recognize were waiting. "You've been talking too much, Cade," one of them said. "The first blow hit me in the ribs. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to send a message. If Barrett was sending muscle into the prison, it meant he was scared." The next morning, Huck found me in the infirmary. "He's desperate," Huck finally said. Miller found the house. Lila is there, but she's not a guest. She's being treated for a nervous breakdown. They have her on so many sedatives, she can barely speak. "We have to get her out," I rasped. "Miller's on it," Huck said. "But we need the evidence of the blackmail." I thought back to the night of the murder. The necklace. Barrett had given it to her. He probably put a bug in it. A way to listen to her. If the necklace had a transmitter, there were recordings. "Where would he keep the server?" Huck asked. "In the one place he thinks is untouchable," I said. "The family estate, the basement vault." On the 3rd night, Huck approached me. He didn't speak. He just dropped a small silver object onto my tray, a flash drive. "Miller got in," Huck whispered. "The recordings are on there." Barrett's voice telling Lila exactly what to say. The threats against her family. The whole confession. I gripped the flash drive so hard the plastic dug into my palm. This was it. My freedom. As the first gray light of dawn began to bleed into the sky, I heard the sound of multiple sirens. They were coming for the gate. The heavy steel door at the end of the tier opened, and a woman from the district attorney's office stopped in front of my cell. The guard stepped forward, his hand trembling slightly as he fumbled with the keys. The lock turned with a heavy, satisfying click. "Cade." The woman said, "There's been a significant development in your case. We need you to come with us." I stepped out of the cell, my legs feeling strangely light. We reached the final gate, the one that led to the outside world. I saw the black Lincoln parked by the curb, but it wasn't Barrett behind the wheel. It was a fleet of police cruisers. And in the middle of it all, I saw a familiar figure being led toward a van, his hands cuffed behind his back. Barrett. He saw me then. I saw my brother for what he truly was, a small, hollow man. I didn't feel the surge of joy I expected. I just felt a deep, profound sense of exhaustion. I took a deep breath, the cold morning air filling my lungs. I started to walk toward the light, every step a slow, deliberate reconstruction of the man I used to be. The pavement was hard under my feet, a solid foundation after months of shifting sand. I reached out to touch the cold metal of a nearby fence, not to hold on to it, but to feel the boundary of a world that was finally mine again. The asphalt of the prison parking lot felt like a different planet beneath my thin-soled shoes. After months of feeling the unyielding, jagged vibration of concrete and steel, the simple texture of the open road was overwhelming. I stood there bathed in the pale, flickering strobe of police lights, watching the man who shared my DNA being shoved into the back of a transport van. Barrett's eyes were wide, darting like a trapped rat's, stripped of the arrogance that had been his armor for decades. He looked small. He looked pathetic. And as the van door slammed shut with a finality that echoed across the gravel, I realized that the man I had loved as a brother had died long before that night in my living room. I wasn't just walking away from a prison. I was walking away from a ghost. The drive to the medical facility in Lake Geneva felt like an eternity. I sat in the back of a black sedan, not a Lincoln, but a nondescript government car that smelled of stale upholstery and justice. The trees blurring past the window were a lush, vibrant green I hadn't seen in forever, but my eyes were fixed on the horizon. I didn't care about the sprawling estates or the sparkling lake water. I only cared about the woman who had been a prisoner in a gilded cage while I was rotting in a literal one. When we arrived at the retreat, it didn't look like a hospital. It looked like a fortress of silence tucked away behind towering stone walls and weeping willows. The sheriff's deputies were already there, their presence a quiet storm that had neutralized Barrett's private security. I found her in a sun-drenched room on the second floor. Lila was sitting in an armchair by the window, her hands resting limply in her lap. She looked fragile, her skin the color of parchment, her eyes clouded by the chemical fog Barrett had forced upon her. But when the door creaked open, she turned her head. "Cade," she whispered the name, barely a breath. I didn't say anything. I just knelt beside her chair and took her hands in mine. They were ice cold. She began to sob, a deep, soul-shattering sound that had been bottled up for months. She told me everything, how Barrett had cornered her, how he had shown her photos of her sister tied to a chair, how he had promised to kill us both if she didn't play her part. "I thought I killed you." She choked out her fingers, gripping my shoulders as if I might vanish. "When I saw the news, when they said you were going away forever, I thought I had buried the only good thing in my life. He's gone, Lila." I said, my voice thick. "It's over. He can't touch us anymore." But even as I said it, I knew over was a relative term. The business was in shambles, our reputation was a crime scene, and the house we had built was a tomb for a man named Reese. We weren't going back to that masterpiece of a life. The weeks that followed were a blur of depositions, grand jury testimonies, and the slow, agonizing process of reclaiming what was left of my identity. Barrett's trial was short. The recordings from the vault, his own cold, calculated voice detailing the blackmail and the murder of Reese, were a death sentence for his freedom. He tried to claim he did it for the legacy that he was saving the company from my lack of ambition. The jury didn't buy it. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I didn't go to the sentencing. I had already seen his soul, and it was empty. Lila and I moved away. We left Chicago, the business, and the shadows behind. We bought a small place near the coast where the sound of the waves drowned out the echoes of the slamming cell doors. We spend our days in a quiet sort of reconstruction. Some wounds heal, but the scars stay sensitive to the touch. Sometimes I catch her staring at the gold necklace, the real one, the one I picked up for her, and I see the flicker of the night the world ended. But then she looks at me, and I see the dawn. I'm sitting here now looking at the camera because I want you to know that the American dream isn't about the big house or the $3 million deal. It's about the truth. It's about the strength it takes to keep your heart from turning into stone when everyone you love turns their back on you. I lost my brother, my company, and my peace of mind. But I found something Barrett will never have. I found out who I am when everything else is stripped away. Life is a series of walls. Some are made of brick, some are made of lies. You can't always stop people from building them around you, but you can damn sure decide not to let them stay up. If you're trapped in your own nightmare right now, if you feel like the world has decided you're the villain in a story you didn't write, don't stop walking. The light is there, even if it's just a sliver under the door. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you believe in second chances, hit that subscribe button and share this. Let's make sure the truth is louder than the lies. I'm Cade, and I'm finally, truly home. I walked toward the edge of the deck, the salt spray of the ocean misting against my skin, and I didn't look back at the door. I looked at the vast indigo horizon where the water met the sky, and for the first time in a very long time, I let out a breath that didn't feel like a cage.